Hey, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and I'm sorry for not uploading in quite a while. I've been really busy with work and doing other things, mainly making the bloody probes and greyballs, as you can probably see behind me. I've been spending a lot of time on that, but also trying to sort out some new stuff for you guys for projects. And in the previous one, we did some not the big project, but the basic starter project with the bird box, and there was a lot of sort of people asking if we can do other things in between, mostly layout, and there was some lighting. But I think we can cover a lot of this in the other bigger projects, but I think I'm going to do smaller tutorials in between to sort of cover those requested topics. So in this one, we're going to do some really basic lighting, and it's just some key fundamentals of lighting in 3D. These are not like the 100% set ways you should do things. It's not like a law you have to follow, but it's one of the best places you can start with, and it's generally 3-point lighting, and most of the time this will give you great results. It's a great place to start, but don't limit yourself to it. Lighting's an incredibly creative part of 3D and VFX. It's actually one of them, probably right up there at the most important parts. It's the difference between your stuff looking amazing and kind of shit, and lighting. You can have the best model in the world and best textures, if it's not lit very well, you've ruined it. So lighting is really up there, like the utmost importance of the whole VFX pipeline. So yeah, it's really good to learn, and starting off with the absolute basics like 3-point lighting is going to get you a really good start. So in this tutorial, we're just going to go through some really basic portrait setups. We're going to use a bust and a backdrop. We're just going to use 3-point lighting and different types of 3-point lighting set up for portraits. So I'm talking on a lot, so we're just going to get started now. So hope you enjoyed the tutorials, and hope you enjoyed the Discord server. I finally got one. And hit that like button and subscribe for more like this. So I've opened up this lighting guide, and you can grab this off the Google. I'll put it in my description so you can download it as well. And it's just pretty much a basic guide for photography. And when you're working with lighting, it's a key part of your art form and all your lighting, obviously. So because it's probably one of the most important parts of the pipeline, because it's very easy to make things look awful with bad lighting, and it's really hard to make awful things look great with good lighting. So it's really important. So we're only going to go through the basics, and this lighting guide, it really does like sort of explain things quite well. You've probably heard quite a lot about 3-point lighting and stuff like that. Most of the time, all good shots come from that sort of derivative, and it's a really good starting point. And also it helps you sort of like get the idea of angles and work out what your lights are doing in 3D. So you can see we've got loads here, and we'll try to get through as many of these as we can, but I think we'll just do, to keep these short, we'll do maybe 4 or something, then we'll see how we feel afterwards. So yeah, we're going to just start with the top one, the Rembrandt with a softbox, and we're just going to recreate this with our bust. And you're probably wondering how I've got this like this. This is PureRef. It's really useful. It's like a canvas. You can stick stuff over the top of your workspace, and it just stays on top. So I can just minimize this down here now, and just keep that, and that'll always be there. And I can minimize it down here. It's just pretty useful. So I'm going to start with this one, and now you can sort of see what you'll get with your downloads. You've got this bust of David. Let's go to what perspective. You have this sort of really basic softbox and a plinth. Nothing else. You can have the render camera as well. It's just a camera straight at the face viz. And whilst selecting this camera, you notice that I've got my focal length on 80. You can obviously try whatever you want. Obviously on photography standards, for portraits, and this is also quite important with like making your sort of artwork look as best as possible, is picking right focal lengths for stuff. And with photography, the same rules apply pretty much with VFX. You just have a little bit more freedom to go a bit crazy. But I'm going to start with an 80mm. And if I just go to my camera, you can see it's pretty much framed like this. And this just means that if I wanted to, I can really frame most of my character in shot. Whereas if it was like obviously if it was 35mm, we're going to get still the character, but more background, and we're going to get stranger sort of looks that we don't want. You can see how as the further he starts coming out of the field of view, forehead starts growing. This is why sometimes like you'll hear that like the camera adds £15 or takes it away. It never takes it away, it always adds it. But with 80, you can see how much change there is. There's not really anything happening. So if I zoom in and zoom out, you can see there's not really much happening. Whereas if it was on 20mm, if we just focus on the forehead, you can see it's sort of like growing from the field of view. And you get some really sort of not very pleasant looks. But if you go too far, like 200, you can start making look things very flat and a bit overweight. That's where they're adding £15 or however much from camera. So if we just go with an 80, we can sort of keep it as a nice sort of, it's not distorting when we zoom in and zoom out, and it's also fairly slimline. But anyway, this is not all about cameras and lenses. We're going to do some lighting. So I'm just going to lock my camera off here, just so I don't move it or anything. There it is. Cool. So we've got this Rembrandt with softbox. And if we look at this, it says we're not going to make a softbox. We'll just edit our light to sort of represent a softbox. You can make a softbox, but you won't get that in sort of a sort of task in lighting. You can do all that sort of in the actual light itself. Cool. So we're going to go with the Rembrandt with softbox. And the first thing that I'm going to do is if we just like read through this, it's just one strobe light, one light stand, and a 20-inch softbox. And obviously we've got backdrop, and it's just one sort of softbox key light going straight across the face. And what says the shadow of the nose should point towards the edge of the lips. And you can see it sort of does here. So we're going to try and recreate that as well with just one light. We've got our camera straight in front. So I'm just going to go to my panels, perspective. I'm just going to stick my backdrop in a layer so I don't actually accidentally move it. And I can hide it. So I'm just going to go to Arnold, Lights, and Area Light. And it will make it at the origin. So I'm just going to go to my orthographic top. And it might make it easier if I unlock this, and that won't change anything. It just means I can see it now. Cool. So we're slightly a bit off angle, but let's see what that looks like. Unlock all these. Let's actually get that. Sorry about that. I was messing around. It's actually, it was tilted. I prefer it like that. Obviously, you can do whatever you like. I'm going to leave it as that. I'm messing around with that too much now. I'm just going to go to my orthographic top. I've got my area light, and it will come in at the origin because it's really small. So if you remember from the other ones, we can scale these up so we can see them. But don't forget, scaling also changes how they react on our subject as well. So I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees because this line here is the direction it's pointing. And obviously if these ones is face on, so we do want to replicate that, but we don't kind of want to replicate exactly. We want to get this effect, but our character is not looking face onto camera, it's looking a little bit off. But we're still going to go through the same sort of methods. So I've just rotated it around. You can see that we're quite far away. Cool. And she's obviously looking quite forward, and this is going straight across the face. And if we look at this now, we're a little bit off because of his face is tilted. And I'll show you the effects of what scaling does to your light as well. So we're just going to leave it like that. Move to my cameras, render camera. And I'm not going to worry about the render resolution. And I'm just going to get Arnold, render view. And let's just see what this looks like. We probably won't see anything because we also need to set up the exposure and stuff. Cool. So it's probably dark. So we need to go to our attributes editor of our light. And you can see we've got these Arnold area light attributes. We've got intensity and exposure. So these work in two sort of different ways. I prefer to either use one or the other. I never really use both. So I'm sure there's a reason, but I can't remember. But I always just use one. But like you can put 10 in there, and you can see there's nothing really updating. Put 1,000. We're starting to see our subject. If we put 2,000. We're starting to see a little bit more. But we have also forgotten to unhide our backdrop. And make sure you do have Arnold shaders on these, otherwise it won't work as well. So on these, I'm just going to do it again, just in case you haven't done it. I'm just going to right click on my backdrop, unreference it. I'm going to right click on my backdrop, assign new material, Arnold, AI standard surface. I think I've already made one for this, but let's do it again. Backdrop. And I don't want any specular on it. And you can choose whether if you want it white, pure white. We're just going to leave everything as standard at the moment. And I'm going to do the same with this. Assign new material, Arnold, AI standard surface, and just remove all the specular off it and leave it as standard. So it definitely looks like there's still some specular on this. Anyway, right, so if we just go render, update full scene. You can really see it. It's like quite a bit darker in the background. Obviously, these values are getting crazy high, and we don't really want to do it that way. So I'm actually just going to go back to 1. I've put 5 in my exposure. Nothing's happening. If I go 10, I'll start picking it up with much lower values. But the exponential growth of exposure is much quicker the higher up you go. So if we went up to 15 now, you can see how, not 115, that's crazy. You can see how it's getting brighter and brighter, whereas when we were almost in the thousands on this. So I tend to always just keep it as, I just work with 1 exposure. But yeah, so we can sort of see we've worked up to 15, and obviously these are just white, and if you look on here, there's quite some large highlights, but there's obviously textures and stuff on there, so we're not going to get the exact same sort of representation of this, but we can see in our lighting, we've got lighting under our eye and some around our lip and a strong shadow. We haven't really got that here, so we're probably too far around. Or we could probably, for this case, let's rotate our model. Just for the sake of this, I'm matching it. I don't want to put it face on because it's pretty simple and it doesn't look as nice. This model's very much supposed to be looking sideways, right? It's just what it is. Cool. And we can sort of see that our lighting is still completely wrong. But it seems to be at a wrong angle. So I'm just going to pause this. Go to perspective. So obviously to have this light going down, we need to be higher than our subject with it pointing down. So I'm just going to raise it up, tilt down. And you now see that we've got a much different sort of look. The nose shadow is pointing a bit further down. I've not quite got it the same. I don't know why that is showing. Let's just ignore that. I don't know why it's still showing us back. Anyway, cool. So we're going to move this around and we're going to try and get this matching as close as we can. And I don't have the best machine, so I have to pause my render view whilst it's going. And we can see we're slowly now getting there. We've got this light under the eye and our nose is pointing down. And we've got a pretty decent sort of backdrop lit. It's probably because that's not a very good colour. Let's put this at 1. But yeah. Cool. So we've got a pretty decent result just from using one light. And we haven't really done anything. We can sort of see we've got some grain around here where it's quite noisy. And that's just because we haven't got our samples up. So I guess one of the other things I did mention as well, that I just want to try and keep these quite, I don't want to keep them too long. So we will just go through this quickly. I mentioned that before, that scaling the light does affect it. So if we just take a screenshot, maybe I'll be able to scale it whilst it's going down. Cool. You might not be able to tell, but the shadows are getting much harder. See how the shadows are much tighter and like sharper on this one? That's because when we're scaling, we're affecting the spread of the light. So obviously, it's a mix. You have to learn that the scale of the light is also a mix of. You've got to imagine a very small, powerful torch is going to be like a beam of light, but then a large light, which has got a large sort of area, it's going to sort of spread its light out more. Which is the most awful way of explaining things, but so we can sort of, because sometimes you like working with big lights because it's just easier to see and it's easier to sort of play around with it. But we can also do this with the spread, which is exactly what we're doing with the scale. So if we bring our spread all the way down, we can see that we're getting much harsher lighting. And if we completely get rid of the spread, we pretty much like got really, it's I guess it's a choice if people want to have something like that, but it's super overexposed. So we'd have to bring our exposure right down for that to work. And it's not very pretty, but if you are lighting stuff in space, this is a pretty handy tool to sort of cheat that sort of no sort of bounce light look. Because obviously in space it's not really any bounce light because it's space. It's not the best example to show with a bust, but you can sort of see how we can 100% see there's only one light source. Because obviously it's our sun. As one light source, and you can get quite a nice look once this is, say if we brought up our samples, let's crank up to 4, and you can probably get quite a nice look from it. So you've really got to play with these sort of settings. I would say for now, I would leave it just playing with the exposure, scale and spread as you begin with, because there's loads of tricks and really cool stuff you can do with lighting. But if you get really good with the basics, when you get onto like the really complex stuff, it'll be absolutely amazing. So I'm actually just going to leave I'm going to bring my spread up, and so if I had it on 10, it's obviously underexposed. But I can bring down my spread so it's more of you get like a spotlight effect, which is pretty much what I'm trying to say. Which is good in some cases, but it's not what you want in a lot of the cases unless you're doing spotlight. So you can see you kind of have to play with it, and you can sort of see right now what's happening. We're getting way more diffused lighting, and it's just looking nicer. So we've got to try and find, and this is the sort of diffuser we can sort of cheat, because we're not going to put a softbox on there because that's just there's no point, because this is our softbox. And we're just going to bring this down till we sort of got some quite bright spots here. Obviously the skin's a little bit different, and we're just working with a plain white. But we want to get that sort of light and that quite dark on the cheek. Possibly we just need to adjust our light as well. So we are seeing maybe we've come around a little bit too much. See how that's changed it massively of the nose? We're starting to get more of that sort of look around there, and we're getting this sort of patch under the eye. Quite exposed here. Very exposed on the top, so we could probably bring down our exposure. Ooh, so you got to really play with both of them. But we want to achieve this sort of look with our lighting. We got this nice line going under the neck. So we can see some of the chin shadow here and down there, but we can't quite see it on here, which may suggest that we need to go a little bit higher. And this isn't even 3-point lighting yet. This is just one single light. So starting to get more of that light around the neck. Cool, and yeah, I think we're pretty much for this one we're pretty much done. It's really simple. I don't want to do this because we could go on for ages and ages, and I think actually maybe doing all of them at once might be too much. So I'm just going to go through and do them one at a time. So it just means there's going to be loads more tutorials and more for me to do. So yeah, we can crank up the samples a little bit so we can get a much nicer render. Because we're doing it just one single one, we can do it a little bit silly high. Like, in fact, just leave it on 4. But it's entirely up to you. If you're doing... These are silly settings that I use. I wouldn't use these generally, but for single images, it's not so bad for me. But you can play around with those, and cool. Delete those. Cool. So that's gonna render off now. And we've just got one light and a backdrop in there, and you can see it's quite nice. And obviously, we're not even got to the point of 3-point lighting. And it's really good to start off with one light and try and get the best you can from it. So, yeah, in the next one, we are going to do the next one. So, yeah, it's not been a super long tutorial, but I'm just going to try and cut these down as quick as possible. Just so they're not like an hour long. And it's already been 20 minutes of probably me just blabbering on. But I hope you enjoyed this, and it's kind of a good little insight to sort of really basic lighting. I know we've only used one light so far, but hopefully you're getting an idea of the difference between intensity and exposure, and spread, and what scaling does to your lights, and how spread can change the way your sort of lightings look. And going through these will help you sort of understand how lighting tasks might happen. Like you need to do this space shot and you go, oh yeah, I need to do this, and the spread needs to be down. There's not much bounce light. So, or if you're doing portrait shots and you're like, oh no, I need to make it really nice. And we can get it working pretty well with just one light. But obviously Hollywood is 3-point lighting with because at the moment we've just got our key light, then a 3-point lighting setup would basically be a key light, our fill light, and our rim light. And it's sort of like the most basics of a really pretty lit shot. But it's all down to your taste and how you're doing it. Like, obviously there's ways to do things, but it's your art at the end of the day. So if you want it lit crazily, light it crazy. Just do whatever you like with it. Obviously it's up to you. But yeah, I am literally blabbering on. So I hope you've enjoyed this really quick tutorial, just like basic lighting. It's not been anything fancy. Hopefully you've found Pure Ref, which is really useful. Like, next time we'll sort of try and get this one. We can sort of see it's quite harsh. It's much softer. You see how the lighting's a little bit softer around the eyes. It's not so harsh in here. So whereas we're quite dark in here, we want to bring down this sort of light in here. So that would be effectively probably changing the spread. And you can see that Rembrandt with honeycomb, and you can see what's happened here. We've reduced the spread. The honeycomb will... So it's really simple to think about this in a way as like, think about your softbox as spreaders, basically. Oh, sorry if I'm going on again, but I went off on a tangent now. So like, you've got your diffuser or softbox, which is adding spread to your light. So we can add spread or reduce exposure and stuff like that. And Rembrandt with a Brolly, you can see that's actually pushing more spread out. So we're getting much more diffuse light, softer lights around the edges. And you can see it's much, much nicer. I prefer this to the sort of softbox, because I think with a softbox you do need a fill light. And the Brolly sort of almost cheats a fill light. And you get a much nice softer shadow instead of these harsh dark areas. And then you've got the honeycomb, which is basically turn your light into a spotlight. So as you can see in the picture, which we've probably went through and showed, that it's pretty harsh lighting. It's not, so like I say, it's not my taste. Some people love it. It's a style. So don't let anyone go like, oh no, you shouldn't like that. It's like, it's how you want to do it. But it's kind of to unlock those things that you want to do. And we can sort of see the Rembrandt with a silver Brolly. So if we look through the sort of Rembrandt with a Brolly, we can see there's much different sort of specular change on here, and like it's much whiter. It's changing the color of the skin tone almost, but it's making everything look much brighter with very similar exposure. But anyway, I'm not going to keep going on. Pure Ref's really useful. I'll download it. It's free, or you can donate. You can make your own sort of canvases. But yeah, this was our first sort of basic lighting. Oh God, I've gone on for ages. So yeah, all the stuff's download for free. Get Pure Ref, have a play. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Sorry for blabbering on for the last like 10 minutes. But yeah, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more like this. And don't forget to join the Discord. Thank you for listening.